If we look into comparative religion, particularly of the Asian variety, we recognize that Buddhism arose out of Hinduism, because we know Sakyamuni was born a Hindu. And then the Bodhidharma took the Buddhist teachings across the Himalayas into China, where it combined with Taoism and Confucianism to become Chan. And then it was imported into Japan, where it combined with Shintoism to become Zen. So let's see what this little story that forces us to dive deeper brings up for us relative to this comment. And it's this story about a very old, wise man who lived in ancient times in the land of China. Now, his wisdom had been gained from many years of study. He'd studied all of those things that were to do with creation. And he knew mathematics and astrology and astronomy and those refined arts also. He'd studied all his life the ancient books and the ways of knowledge. So he was sought after as a very wise man. But he was not a happy man, because he felt that he had written on his heart a word, and that word did not let him rest and find peace and contentment. And that word was mutability. But besides that, his life was bedeviled by the emperor of the day, who asked the most outrageous things of him, like, would you please give the smell of jasmine to the peony flower? And the wise man would say, but my liege, I do not have power to do this. And then he'd ask him make the flowers bloom in winter time. And the wise man would say, I don't have power to do this. And so the emperor one day said to him, well, you're not a wise man worth anything at all. I think I'll just lop your head. Well, the wise man said, please, liege, I have learned that in a far distant place there is that which brings immortality. Allow me to go and seek this place, and I will bring back the means for you to become immortal. Well, this piqued the emperor's interest, so he decided not to lop the wise man's head, and he encouraged him. In fact, he set him up with a ship and the accoutrements which would allow him to make this journey. So the wise man gathered some other able-bodied beings, like those who knew the ways of the ocean and such like. And the emperor even came down to the quay to see them off and wish them well. But after the wise man set out with his entourage, as is the way of things, when they got out into mid-ocean, they were beset with storms and tempests, and a number of those who accompanied the wise man were washed overboard and lost. And then they were beset by pirates who killed off the rest of those who accompanied him, leaving him stranded. unable to guide the ship, he floated, and of course, tired and hungry, he fell in and out of sleep until he awoke one day to see in the distance an island on which grew a tree of great magnificence. To this wise man, according to his heritage, this was the pure land. And the ship somehow made its way to this island. When he got off the ship, he found himself in this amazing place, gardens such as he'd never known before. He was greeted by young people who were obviously ageless, and he himself began to feel youthful and young again. So he knew that he'd arrived in the pure land. And the word that had been emblazoned on his heart, mutability, was gone. He languished there in this place, savoring the wonder, the wonders of agelessness, immortality. But then, in the land of the rising sun, there was also a wise man, but he was young. He hadn't studied ancient text. He didn't have great learning, but he did love to get out in his rowboat and row out into the ocean, where he became one with the elements. But then, one day, when he was rowing far, far out from the land, a storm came up and took away his oars. And so he found himself floating, seemingly aimlessly, until he realized that his rowboat seemed to be following a path. And pretty soon, he saw the island and the tree. But unlike the wise man from China, he did not recognize it as the pure land. But he was glad to step on to land, be greeted also by the ageless people who were there. But after some time, the wise man from China and the young wise man from Japan met and exchanged their stories. And the man from Japan was somewhat agitated. He said to the wise man from China, "I'm looking for my boat. I have to return to my home." And the wise man from China said, "Why? Why are you not happy in this land of immortality? And the wise young man from Japan said, because I have emblazoned on my heart a word that will not let me rest. That word is humanity. So the wise young man from Japan sought out the crane. Now the crane in Japanese lore has great meaning. Perhaps you can tap in to this ancient knowledge, the meaning of the crane. And so the wise young man from Japan asked the crane to take him back to his home land. But the crane said, you have been in the land of immortality for countless years. If you return to your home, you will die. You will return to that place where there is a beginning and end. But the young Japanese wise man said, I must return because emblazoned on my heart is the word humanity. So the crane allowed the young Japanese wise man to climb on its back. And it flew and flew until it returned to the land from which he had come. And the crane said, you have but a very short time. Where would you like to land? The young Japanese wise man said, there, under that tree, is an old fisherman mending his nets. Take me there so that I can rest in the arms of this fisherman to make my departure. The crane brought the young Japanese wise man to the feet of the old fisherman, who lay down his net and took the head of the young man into his lap, where he made his departure. Where is there a relationship between that which begets this and that which begets that? The one spawning the 10,000 things, as the Taoists say. And what is the purpose of bringing these together for us? Diving deep